Good afternoon. So finally we get to the seventh sermon, and there will be a little bit after that in the next couple of days, but here is the seventh sermon to the dead. And keep in mind that what is going on in this book, the Jung's Red Book, Liber Novus, the Reader's Edition, is that Dr. Jung is having an active imagination with his psyche. And so he's getting wisdom directly from his psyche that he can't get any other way. And what he would want you to understand a century later is that you can get wisdom like this from your psyche as well. And through this method of active imagination, which we can talk about in greater detail at a later time. But the point is that this is how Dr. Jung was visioning. And so his visions finally came down to us after Dr. Sonu Shamdasani spent 13 years of his life getting the Red Book into publishable form. And so, as many of you know, the folio version is a huge volume, and in the description underneath this video, you'll find a link to the moment when the heirs of C.G. Jung allowed Dr. Shamdasani and a few others to actually see the real Red Book. It's quite a moving video. It's only 3.5 minutes long, but I urge you to take a look at that. It's very exciting. Now, in terms of helping me get this channel more followed, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell next to the subscription, and that would allow you to be notified each time that we do a video. And then you can come back and check things out on replay. All the videos I've done since July 1st, 2016 have been kept on replay, so you can find every one of them. There's over 820 of them at this point in time. And actually, let me just double check that number, but I'm pretty sure that's right. There are 830 as of today, so this would be number 831. And on the main page of the channel, I've pointed you to some of the more important works of Dr. Jung so that you can find either readings of them, or in the case of Answer to Job, you can find an entire course that I did online about Answer to Job. And so today I'll be reading from the seventh sermon to the dead. Now keep in mind, Dr. Jung is visioning this scenario, and when he refers to either Philemon or Elijah, he's referring to a symbolic image of his self, and these actually appear in physical form, but in his psyche. They're psychogenetic, and so you may have had similar visioning over your lifetime, and so that's what is happening. And so Philemon represents Dr. Jung's self, and then his ego self is communicating with Philemon. Okay, so I'm on page 534 of the Red Book by C.G. Jung, Reader's Edition. Another day passed, and the seventh night fell, and the dead came again, this time with pitiful gestures, and said, "We forgot to mention one thing, that we would like you to teach us about men." And Philemon stepped before me and began to speak. And this is the 7th sermon to the dead. Man is a gateway through which you pass from the outer world of the gods, demons, and souls into the inner world, out of the greater into the smaller world. Small and inane is man. Already he is behind you, and once again you find yourselves in endless space, in the smaller or inner infinity. At immeasurable distance, a lonely star stands in the zenith. This is the one God of this one man. This is his world, his pleroma, his divinity. In this world, man is Abraxas, the creator and destroyer of his own world. This star is the God and the goal of man. This is his one guiding God. In him, man goes to his rest. Toward him goes the long journey of the soul after death. In him, everything that man withdraws from the greater world shines resplendently. To this one God, man shall pray. Prayer increases the light of the star. It throws a bridge across death. It prepares life for the smaller world and assuages the hopeless desires of the greater. When the greater world turns cold, the star shines. Nothing stands between man and his one God, so long as man can turn away his eyes from the flaming spectacle of Abraxas. Man here, God there. Weakness and nothingness here, eternally creative power there. Here nothing but darkness and clammy cold, there total sun. So what Dr. Jung's psyche is telling him at this point, his self is telling him, Philemon is telling him, that everything that about man that we know from a spiritual point of view is actually within us. It's not out there. If you cross the goal line in a football game and point like this, you're pointing in the wrong direction, because the right direction is either at your heart or at your head, or the best would be if you pointed at both of them. And so that's what Dr. Jung is saying about that. Now, there is some discussion about this idea now. That was a short sermon, and that sermon was given or written down in Dr. Jung's Black Book number 6 on February the 8th, 1916. And I'll read a couple of footnotes here. And this is a footnote after the last sentence I read, which is, here nothing but darkness and clammy cold, but there total sun. So here's the footnote that goes with that. On February 29th, 1919, Jung wrote a letter to Joan Corey and commented on the Sermones, with particular reference to the last one. Quote, the primordial creator of the world, the blind creative libido, becomes transformed in man through individuation, and out of this process, which is like pregnancy, arises a divine child, a reborn God, no more, meaning no longer dispersed into the millions of creatures, but being one and this individual, and at the same time all individuals, the same in you as in me. Dr. Long has a little book, 7 Sermones ad Mortuis, that's 7 Sermons to the Dead in Latin. There you find the description of the Creator dispersed into his creatures, and in the last sermon, You find the beginning of individuation, out of which the divine child arises. The child is a new God, actually born in many individuals, but they don't know it. He is a spiritual God, a spirit in many people, yet one and the same everywhere. Keep to your time, and you will experience his qualities. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so now I will read the commentary. Let me just look at your comments. Hello, Ian. Thank you for joining us from New Zealand. And hello, Lewis. Welcome from Utah. Okay, so this is Dr. Jung's commentary after the 7th sermon. But when Philemon had finished, the dead remained silent. Heaviness fell from them, and they ascended like smoke above the shepherd's fire, who watches over his flock by night. But I turned to Philemon and said, Illustrious one, you teach that man is a gateway. A gateway, well, he puts it as a question, so let me read that with different emphasis. Illustrious one, you teach that man is a gateway through the procession of the gods passes, through which the stream of life flows, through which the entire future seems in the endlessness of the past. Philemon answered, saying, These dead believed in the transformation and development of man. They were convinced of human nothingness and transitoriness. Nothing was clearer to them than this, and yet they knew that man even creates its gods, and so they knew that the gods were of no use. Therefore they had to learn what they did not know, that man is a gateway through which crowds the train of the gods. And the coming and passing of all times. He does not do it, does not create it, does not suffer it, since he is the being, the sole being, since he is the moment of the world, the eternal moment. Whoever recognizes this stops being flame. He becomes smoke and ashes. He lasts, and his transitoriness is over. He has become someone who is. You dreamed of the flame as if it were life, but life is duration. The flame dies away. I carried that over. I saved it from the fire. That is the son of the fire flower. You saw that in me. I myself am the eternal fire of light, but I am the one who saved it for you, the black and golden seed and its blue starlight. You eternal being, what is length and brevity? What is the moment and eternal duration? You being, are eternal in each moment. What is time? Time is the fire that flares up, consumes, and dives down. I saved being from time, redeeming it from the fires of time and the darkness of time, from gods and devils. But I said to him, Illustrious one, when will you give me the dark and golden treasure and its blue starlight? Philemon replied, when you have surrendered everything that wants to burn in the holy flame. There's a footnote to this statement. In September 1916, Jung had conversations with his soul that provide further elaboration and clarification of the cosmology of the sermones, the sermons. September 25th, Soul, how many lights do you want, 3 or 7? 3 is the heartfelt and modest, 7 the general and encompassing. I, What a question, and what a decision. I must be true. I think I would like 7 lights. Soul, 7, you say. I thought so. That has broad scope and cold lights. I need cooling, fresh air, enough of this stifling mugginess, too much fear and not enough free breathing. Give me 7 lights. Soul. The first light means the pleroma. The second means Abraxas. The third, the sun. The fourth, the moon. The fifth, the earth. The sixth, the phallus. The seventh, the stars. Why were there no birds, and why were the celestial mother and the sky missing? Soul. They are all enclosed in the star. As you look at the star, you look through them. They are the bridges to the star. They form the 7th light, the highest, the floating, which rises with flapping wings, releasing from the embrace of the tree of light, with 6 branches and 1 blossom, in which the god of the star lay slumbering. The 6 lights are single and form a multiplicity. The 1 light is 1 and forms a unity. It is the blossoming crown of the tree, the holy egg, the seed of the world endowed with wings so it can reach its place. The 1 gives rise to the many over and again, and the many entails the 1. September 28th, 1916. Soul. Now let us try this. It is something of the golden bird. It is not the white bird, but the golden one. It is different. The white bird is a good demon, but the golden one is above you and under your God. It flies ahead of you. I see it in the blue ether, flying toward the star. It is something that is part of you, and it is at the same time its own egg and containing you. Do you feel me? Then ask. Tell me more. It makes me feel queasy. Soul. The golden bird is no soul. It is your entire nature. People are golden birds as well, not all. Some are worms and rot in the earth. But many are also golden birds. Continue, I fear my revulsion. Tell me what you have grasped. Soul. The golden bird sits in the tree of the 6 lights. The tree grows out of Abraxas's head, but Abraxas grows out of the pleroma. Everything from which the tree grows blossoms as a light, transformed, as a womb of the flowering treetop, of the golden egg, bird. The tree of light is first a plant, which is called an individual. This grows out of Abraxas's head. His thought is one among many. The individual is a mere plant without flowers and fruits, a passageway to the tree of 7 lights. The individual is a precursor of the tree of light. The lucent blossoms from him, Phanes himself, Agni, a new fire, a golden bird. This comes after the individual, namely when it has been reunited with the word, the world blossoms from it. When it has been reunited with the world blossoms from it. Abraxas is the drive, individual, distinct from him. But the tree of the 7 lights is the symbol of the individual united with Abraxas. This is where Phanes appears, and he, the golden bird, flies ahead, you unite yourself with Abraxas through me. First you give me your heart, and then you live through me. I am the bridge to Abraxas. Thus, the tree of light arises in you, and you become the tree of light, and Phanes arises from you. You have anticipated, but not understood this. At the time, you had to separate from Abraxas to become individual, opposed to the drive. Now you become one with Abraxas. This happens through me. You cannot do this. Therefore, you must remain with me. Unification with the physical Abraxas occurs through the human female, but that with the spiritual Abraxas occurs through me. That is why you must be with me. Okay, so this is his self talking. And he's, in all these cases, he's talking about human development, psychological development, transformation that's going on in the psyche. That's the universe we're talking about. And so the star that he's talking about is not a star out there, not at all. It's a star that mankind has envisioned from time immemorial, from as long as there have been men. And that star is in the psyche. It's not up there. The point is that which there is no part right. And what's the other quote? The quote is the self is a point. Let's see. The circumference of which is a circle, and the center of which is a point, or something like that. Okay, now let me go on with this. So when Philemon's talking about the surrender, he's talking about an internal, a psychological surrender. Philemon replied, "When you have surrendered everything that wants to burn to the holy flame." And as Philemon spoke these words, a dark form with golden eyes approached me from the shadows of the night. I was startled and cried, "Are you an enemy? Who are you? Where do you come from? I have never seen you before. Speak, what do you want?" The dark one answered, saying, "I come from afar. I come from the east and follow the shining fire that precedes me, Philemon. I am not your enemy. I am a stranger to you. My skin is dark, and my eyes shine golden." "What do you bring?" I asked carefully. "I bring abstinence. Abstinence from human joy and suffering. Compassion leads to alienation. Pity, but no compassion. Pity for the world, and a will held in check toward the other. Pity remains misunderstood, therefore it works. Far from longing, know no fear. Far from love, love the whole." I looked at him fearfully and said, "Why are you as dark as the earth of the fields and as black as iron? I'm afraid of you. Such pain. What have you done to me?" "You may call me death, death that rose with the sun. I come with quiet pain and long peace. I lay the cover of protection on you. In the midst of life begins death. I lay cover upon you, so that your warmth will never cease." "You bring grief and despair," I answered. "I wanted to be among men." But he said, "You will go to men as one veiled. Your light shines at night. Your solar nature departs from you, and your stellar nature begins." "You are cruel," I sighed. "The simple is cruel. It does not unite with the manifold." With these words, the mysterious Dark One vanished, but Philemon regarded me with a serious and questioning look. "Did you take a proper look at him, my son?" he said. "You will be hearing from him. But come now, so that I can fulfill what the Dark One prophesied for you." As he spoke these words, he touched my eyes and opened my gaze and showed me the immeasurable mystery. And I looked for a long time until I could grasp it. But what did I see? I saw the night. I saw the dark earth, and above this the sky stood gleaming in the brilliance of countless stars. And I saw that the sky had the form of a woman, and sevenfold was her mantle of stars, and it completely covered her. And when I beheld it, Philemon said, "Mother, you who stand in the higher circle, nameless one, who shrouds me and him, and protects me and him from the gods, he wants to become your child. May you accept his birth. May you renew him. I separate myself from him. The cold is growing, and its star blazes brighter. He needs the bond of childhood." You gave birth to the godly serpent. You released it from the pangs of birth. Take this man to the abode of the sun. He needs the mother. A voice came from afar and was like a falling star. I cannot take him as a child. He must cleanse himself first. Philemon said, "What is his impurity?" But the voice said, "It is the commingling. He contains human suffering and joy. He shall remain secluded until abstinence is complete, and he is freed from the commingling with man. And he is freed from the commingling with man. Then he shall be taken as a child." In this moment my vision ended, and Philemon went away, and I was alone. And I remained apart, as I had been told. But in the fourth night I saw a strange form, a man wearing a long coat and turban. His eyes shone cleverly and kindly, like a wise doctor's. He approached me and said, "I speak to you of joy." But I answered, "You want to speak of me of joy? I bleed from the thousandfold wounds of men." He replied, "I bring healing. Women taught me this art. They know how to heal sick children. Do your wounds burn you? Healing is at hand. Give ear to good counsel, and do not be incensed." I retorted, "What do you want? You tempt me, mock me." "What are you thinking?" he interrupted. "I bring you the bliss of paradise and healing fire, the love of women." Are you thinking, I asked, of the decent... Are you thinking, I asked, of the descent into the frog swamp? The dissolution of the many, the scattering, the dismembering? But as I spoke... But as I spoke, the old man turned into Philemon, and I saw that he was the magician who was tempting me. But Philemon continued, "You have not yet experienced the dismembering. You should be blown apart and shredded and scattered to the winds. Men are preparing for the Last Supper with you." "What then will remain of me?" I cried. "Nothing but your shadow. You will be a river that pours forth over the lands. It seeks every valley and streams toward the depths." I asked, full of grief, "But where will my uniqueness remain?" "You will steal it from yourself," Philemon replied. "You will hold the invisible realm in trembling hands. It lowers its roots into the gray darkness and mysteries of the earth and sends up branches covered in leaves into the golden air. Animals live in its branches. Men camp in its shade. Their murmuring arises from below. 1,000-mile-long disappointment is the juice of the tree. It will stay gray for a long time. Silence abides in its treetop. Silence in its deep roots. I need to just rest my eyes for a moment. Robert Salz. May the archetypal gods bless you in individuated form for doing this work and sharing, my friend. Thank you. It's very difficult. Sometimes when I'm reading some of this work, it is so overwhelming in terms of different ideas, different ways that we look at these things, that it actually hypnotizes me. And we have had videos where I literally go and go out. I literally am hypnotizing myself, and that's what's happening right now. So my eyes are getting very heavy, and it gets harder to read. And if you ever read Dr. Jung's work, you'll see exactly what I mean, that it is difficult work. As Jordan Peterson once said, a lot of people just bounce off Jung because they can't penetrate into the ideas that he's expressing, because they're so contrary to what we've been taught in Western society. So Sean says, a deep part of the seventh sermon resonates with me is the smoke above the herdsman's fire. Yes. And Vincent says, heroism, we know it's difficult, but keep it up, Skip. Okay. All right, so there's 3.5 more pages here in this particular section that I'm going to try to read. I gathered from Philemon's words that I must remain true to love to cancel out the commingling that arises through unlived love. I understood that the commingling is a bondage that takes the place of voluntary devotion. Scattering or dismembering arises, as Philemon had taught me, from voluntary devotion. It cancels out the commingling. Through voluntary devotion, I removed binding ties. Therefore, I had to remain true to love and devoted to it voluntarily. I suffer the dismembering and thus attain bonding with the Great Mother, that is, the stellar nature, liberation from bondage to men and things. If I am bound to men and things, I can neither go on with life to its destination, nor can I arrive at my very own deepest nature. Nor can death begin in me as a new life, since I can only fear death. I must therefore remain true to love, since how else can I arrive at the scattering and dissolution of bondage? How else could I experience death other than through remaining true to love and willingly accepting the pain and all the suffering? As long as I do not voluntarily devote myself to the dismembering, a part of myself secretly remains with men and things and binds me to them. Thus I must, whether I want to or not, be a part of them, mixed in with them and bound to them. Only fidelity to love and voluntary devotion to love enable this binding and mixing to be dissolved and led back to me that part of myself that secretly lay with men and things. Only thus does the light of the star grow. Only thus do I arrive at my stellar nature, at my truest and innermost self, that simply and singly is. You know, he's referring to the star, which, if we refer back to alchemy you might know as the lapis philosophorum, but that's a different topic, so let me finish this. It is difficult to remain true to love, since love stands above all sins. He who wants to remain true to love must also overcome sin. Nothing occurs more readily than failing to recognize that one is committing a sin. Overcoming sin for the sake of remaining true to love is difficult, so difficult that my feet hesitated to advance. When night fell, Philemon approached me in an earth-colored robe, holding a silver fish. "Look, my son," he said, "I was fishing and caught this fish. I bring it to you so that you may be comforted." And as I looked at him astonished and questioningly, I saw that a shade stood in darkness at the door, bearing a robe of grandeur. There's a footnote here, and the footnote says Christ. So he's envisioning that this shade that has brought him a fish is Christ. His face was pale, and blood had flowed into the furrows of his brow. But Philemon knelt down, touched the earth, and said to the shade, "My master and my brother, praised be your name. You did the greatest thing for us. Out of animals you made men. You gave your life for men to enable their healing. Your spirit was with us through an endlessly long time. And men still look to you and still ask you to take pity on them and beg for the mercy of God and the forgiveness of their sins through you. You do not tire of giving to men. I praise your divine patience. Are not men ungrateful? Does their craving know no limits? Do they still make demands on you? They have received so much, yet still they are beggars. Behold, my master and my brother, they do not love me, but they long..." I think this is quoting from something Christ would be saying here, but we'll see. Quote, "Behold, my master and my brother, they do not love me, but they long for you with greed, for they also crave their neighbor's possessions. They do not love their neighbor, but they want what is his. If they were faithful to their love, they would not be greedy, but whoever gives attracts desire. Should they not learn love, fidelity to love, freely willed devotion? But they demand and desire and beg from you and have learned no lesson from your awe-inspiring life. They have imitated it, but they have not lived their own lives as you have lived yours. Your awe-inspiring life shows how everyone would have to take their own life into their own hands, faithful to their own essence and their own love. Have you not forgiven the adulteress? Did you not sit with the whores and the tax collectors? Did you not break the command of the Sabbath? You lived your own life, but men fail to do so. Instead, they pray to you and make demands on you and forever remind you that your work is incomplete. Yet your work would be completed if men managed to live their own lives without imitation. Men are still childish and forget gratitude, since they cannot say, 'Thanks be to you, our Lord, for the salvation you have brought us.' We have taken it unto ourselves, given it a place in our hearts, and we have learned to carry on your work in ourselves on our own. Through your help, we have grown mature in continuing the work of redemption in us. Thanks to you, we have embraced your work. We grasped your redemptive teaching. We completed in ourselves what you have begun for us with bloody struggle. We are not ungrateful children who desire our parents' possessions. Thanks to you, our master, we will make the most of your talent and will not bury it in the earth and forever stretch out our hands helplessly and urge you to complete your work in us. We want to take your troubles and your work upon ourselves so that your work may be completed and so that you may lay your weary, tired hands in your lap, like the worker after a long day's hard burden. Blessed is the dead one who rests from the completion of his work. I wanted people to address you in this way, but they have no love for you, my master and brother. They begrudge you the price of peace. They leave your work incomplete, eternally needing your pity and your care. But my master and brother, I believe you have completed your work, since the one who has given his life, his entire truth, all his love, his entire soul, has completed his work. That one individual can do for men, you have done and accomplished and fulfilled. The time has come when each must do his own work of redemption. Mankind has grown older, and a new month has begun. When Philemon had finished, I looked up and saw the place where the shade had stood was empty. I turned to Philemon and said, My father, you spoke of men. I am a man. Forgive me. But Philemon dissolved into the darkness, and I decided to do what was required of me. I accepted all the joy and every torment of my nature, and remained true to my love, to suffer what comes to everyone in their own way. And I stood alone and was afraid. Okay, so I'm not sure, that may have passed over your heads here, but this was Philemon addressing Christ, and the point is, as Lawrence Jaffe pointed out in Liberating the Heart. Now, Lawrence Jaffe was an American Jungian analyst who was the son of Agnella Jaffe, who was the secretary to Dr. Jung, who put together Memories, Dreams, Reflections, which was his autobiography of his personal transformation. And we don't have everything from that. I learned today that there's a book that Agnella Jaffe wrote called The Myth of Meaning, which I mean to look up. And there's also a book called Catafalque by Peter Kingsley, and that book I will put it in the Dropbox at some point later today in electronic form. And it covers human psychological development from early Grecian times. Peter Kingsley is a world-renowned scholar on ancient Greece. And I've read parts of it, and it's quite profound. But in any case, the point that Lawrence Jaffe made was that Christ was the most perfect man that ever lived in this sense, Christ was living the life of his self. Okay, and his self made him, at a time that was nearly 2,100 years ago, the Son of God. And so he presented himself in that context perfectly. throughout his, at least during his ministry. We don't know too much about what happened to him before age 30, but his self was telling him to present himself as the Son of God, which he did perfectly. But the sense that he is a God-man comes through when he's on the cross and he gives the plea, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Because that was a comment from a man, not a God. And so it shows that he truly was the God-man. And so when Jung and analysts are talking about imitation of Christ, they don't mean that you should go out and jump up on a cross and have somebody nail you to a cross, as people do in the Philippines every year. But it means that you need to pay attention to yourself, your God image, the deepest archetype in the unconscious, and you have to live the perfect life that comes through that. And it isn't done at the ego level. It's not done at the level of materialism or reduction. I often show a picture. I'm not sure I have it right handy here, but let me just look and see if I have it. Sometimes, okay, here it was anyway. Whoops. Okay. All right, so I often show folks this picture, which is a 63-foot motor yacht that was parked in the marina next to my home, and the name of this motor yacht is Never Enough. And so, and I've been through this phase also, because I owned a power yacht at one point, and the first thing that my partner on the yacht and I said to one another when we got the yacht is, we need a bigger boat, because we were taking it out on the Chesapeake Bay, which is big water, and we very quickly realized that the length of our boat was not as big as we might want for navigation on the bay. We did use it for many years, but the point is that your ego tends to always think this same never enough idea that is expressed in this motor yacht's name, and that's a 63-foot yacht. So I can't imagine how much it must have cost. It's probably $1 million boat, or very close to it, maybe $750,000 or so. But the point is, there's no happiness there. Okay, you can't find happiness by getting a bigger boat, but you can find happiness by fulfilling the reason that you were put on the planet, the meaning of your life. There's no meaning in driving around the Chesapeake Bay and burning up a lot of gas. There's no meaning to that. But your life, you were born for a purpose, and you need to pay attention to what that purpose is and live that fully. And that's not always fun. In the next couple of weeks, I'll be telling the story of what I've been doing for the last 8 years, which has involved a lawsuit that I've been fighting by myself. Fortunately, I am a lawyer, so I was competent to do that fight. But I had absolutely no choice about doing that fight and doing it by myself. So I put more than $1.5 million worth of my own time into fighting that case, because myself, my God image, told me that I had to do it. And I will be discussing that in detail in a couple of weeks. There's just a couple of odds and ends that I want to get tied up before I start talking about that case. But the point is, in terms of the life of Jesus and so on, is that he lived the meaning of his life fully. And so in terms of imitatio Christi, it isn't about going around and becoming a rabbi and giving a lot of pastoral sermons. That's not imitating Christ. Imitating Christ is living the life that you were given by, yes, I'll call it God, because God comes through ourself. And so anyway, I want you to listen now, as I've completed that homily a little bit. I want to read that last just over a page again, so that you can listen to it in the context of what I've just been talking about. So this is Philemon speaking to Christ, who is a shade in Dr. Jung's active imagination. This is all going on inside of the psyche of Dr. Jung. Behold, my master and my brother, they do not love me, but they long for you with greed, for they also crave their neighbor's possessions. Now just think of craving that yacht that I just showed you. They do not love their neighbor, but they want what is his. If they were faithful to their love, they would not be greedy, but whoever gives attracts desire. Should they not learn love, fidelity to love, freely willed devotion? But they demand and desire and beg from you, and have learned no lesson from your awe-inspiring life. This is why I say that, when people pray, oh God, let me make that touchdown today, and then they point at the sky after they make the touchdown, they're demanding that of an entity that is outside themselves. But the place they should be pointing is here, because it's that self that caused them to do all the work, all the time in the gym and all the time on the track, to build themselves up to the point where they could make the touchdown. And then the prayer is a petition to that part of yourself that wants to make that touchdown. It's not a puppeteer up here that's saying, oh yes, I want Johnny to have a touchdown today. That's not the way it works. It doesn't work that way. It works through you. And this is what Dr. Jung is talking about, man as the gateway. They have imitated it, but they have not lived their own lives as you lived yours. Your awe-inspiring life shows how everyone would have to take their own life into their own hands, faithful to their own essence and their own love. So in other words, faithful to their essence within themselves and within yourself. Every one of us has an essence. If you pay attention to it, it will inform you through dreams, visions, little hairs rising on the back of your neck, whatever it is, but you'll know. Have you not forgiven the adulteress? Did you not sit with the whores and tax collectors? Did you not break the command of the Sabbath? You lived your own life, but men fail to do so. Instead, they pray to you and make demands on you and forever remind you that your work is incomplete. Yet your work would be completed if men managed to live their own lives without imitation. So here, what is being said is exactly what I was saying, that people are praying to this entity to help them do something, and it has to be coming from them and what you want as yourself. Men are still childish and forget gratitude. Men are still childish and forget gratitude, since they cannot say, "Thanks be to you, our Lord, for the salvation you have brought us. We have taken it unto ourselves, given it a place in our hearts, and we have learned to carry on your work in ourselves on our own. Through your help, we have grown mature in continuing to work the work of redemption in us. Thanks to you, we have embraced your work. We grasped your redemption teaching. We completed in ourselves what you had begun for us with bloody struggle." So again, he's talking about the redemptive work being living your life, be all you can be, because that's what's expected. And if you did that, then that would complete Christ's life, because that was his message. We are not ungrateful children who desire our parents' possessions. Thanks to you, our Master, we will make the most of your talent and will not bury it in the earth and forever stretch out our hands helplessly and urge you to complete your work in us. So when we grow up, we're not going to believe that there's this puppet master that's going to make us make the touchdown. We want to take your troubles and your work upon us, so that your work may be completed, and so that you may lay your weary, tired hands in your lap, like the worker after a long day's hard burden. Blessed is the dead one who rests from the completion of his work. So when he says dead one here, he means you and me, and he's saying that if we complete the meaning of our life, if we put our tile of life into the great mosaic of humanity and make it count, then we have completed our work, and that is a further completion of Christ's message. I wanted people to address you in this way, but they have no love for you, my master and brother. They begrudge you the price of peace. They leave your work incomplete, eternally needing your pity and your care. And so what he's saying is, don't go asking an emptiness in space for pity and care. Find that within yourself. But my master and my brother, I believe you have completed your work, since the one who has given his life, his entire truth, all his love, his entire soul, has completed his work. What one individual can do for men, you have done and accomplished and fulfilled. And the time has come when each must do his own work of redemption. Mankind has grown older and a new month has begun. And so the point here is that Christ did his part as the Son of God, and now we all have to recognize that we're all sons and daughters of God, not only Christ, but all of us. There is an element of the divine within each one of us, and We need to recognize that and not be overwhelmed by it on one side, but not allow it to go to our head on the other side. There's a middle way where you don't get in trouble. So then he finishes. When Philemon had finished, I looked up and saw the place where the shade had stood was empty. I turned to Philemon and said, "My father, you spoke of men. I am a man. Forgive me." But Philemon dissolved into the darkness, and I decided to do what was required of me. I accepted all the joy and every torment of my nature and remained true to my love, to suffer what comes to everyone in their own way, and I stood alone and was afraid. And that truly sums up the collected works of C.G. Jung, because he often kvetched about having to do a book. For example, when he wrote Answer to Job, he said, I put it off for 40 years, but in the end, I was forced to sit down and write it. And apparently he wrote it in a great fever. And when it was completed, the fever broke. And so that was his self forcing him to do that, just as in my case, myself forced me to do my litigation. And another example is Mysterium Conjunctionis, which is this 1.5-inch thick book, which we'll be discussing in the advanced reading group from February. And that was the last book he wrote in his life, but it is a monumental piece of work. It's incredibly difficult to get into it because it is so scholarly. He commented numerous times in various letters that he just had no choice. He had to do the things that he did throughout his life. And so he did them. And the result is that his spirit still lives with us in the collected works of C.G. Jung. So let me go back here. So ends my homily for today. I'll respond to some of your comments here. So Opiami says, doorways prevail in Dostoevsky's writing. Buzz says, well spoken, Opiami. Lewis says, this is the first live stream I have the pleasure of being part of and had a strong attraction to Dr. Jung through Jordan Peterson. I'm speaking of experience when I refer to the similarities. Buzz says, that's nice, Lewis. I'm interested in Jung through an interest in the I Ching, the I Ching, and psychology, which intrigues me. Robert says, Buzz, you listened to T. McKenna on that topic. Buzz, no, Robert, thank you. I shall check that out. Lewis, it is impossible for a shadow to remain hidden as the sun makes its way around the globe one way or another. We will all be exposed to the truth and be led to the inner core of ourselves. Absolutely. And Robert, it could be a treat then. Welcome. And Buzz, fascinating, Lewis, and yet without light there are no shadows. Opiami. Terence McKenna has a lot to say on Christ and John Allegro and Roman history, particularly the Titus Flavian period. Buzz says, I think he liked the ladies of the night and tax collectors for their honesty in their failings. Must have been quite a man. Lewis, I'm afraid I must go now. Thanks. Peace, Lewis. Thank you for joining us. I'm afraid I must go now. Thanks thanks to Buzz for the conversation into the group. Farewell until then. Blessings to all. And Sean says, that sounds like the story of Abraham archetype, the sense of urgency that comes from within. Absolutely. I mean, Abraham had one of the most important visions, and he's the progenitor of 3 religions, not one, because he's the father figure for Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And what happened with Abraham is quite remarkable. And my friend, my rabbi friend, who has served as the president of the World Union of Progressive Jews, said to me one time that human sacrifice was a scourge of early Iron Age men and late Stone Age men. Humans thought they needed to sacrifice their children in order to get the gods off their back. What an idea. And so Abraham was living with that tradition, and he went up into the mountain with Isaac, intending to sacrifice him, and he had a vision, and the vision was the angel who told him to sacrifice the little mountain goat that was running up and down the hill. And bad luck for the mountain goat, but at least Abraham broke the chain of idiocy of sacrificing children. Look how we know how difficult it is to stop doing that from the Vietnam War, because the country sacrificed 58,000 men and women, more than 58,000, before we got it through our numb skulls that we didn't need to do that. And so finally we finally got it, but it took a long time. And in the late 20th century, by the late 20th century, the religious teachings had seriously weakened, and the result is that we didn't follow the lead of Abraham, and we should have. And I know personally 3 men who are on that wall, whose names are on that wall. 2 of them were very personally close to me, and I absolutely resent the fact that they were sacrificed. And God knows where my life would have gone if I didn't join the Marine Corps and go there and experience that. But again, that was myself telling me at that time I had to do that. And so, notwithstanding the fact that I was going to a little lefty college, where now I'm the lefty, and all of my friends who were protesting the war back then are now the most conservative guys on the planet. It's unbelievable how it's gone the other way. But it wasn't that I was so political back then. I was moved. Myself told me to join the Marine Corps, and I did. And I went and did the full Monty. So that is how we get pushed through life by these, by this God image that's within us all. And Vincent says, heroism, I have to go, but thanks, Robert. Eric, thank you for joining us from the Netherlands. I have a whole line of my family that had its origins in Amersfoort, in a village called Kohenhafen. You can still get a bus at Amsterdam Station that says Kohenhafen across the top of it, and Conover is an anglicization of the word Kohenhafen, and or Kohenhoven, I don't know how you pronounce it in Dutch, and so my ancestors left Holland in 1625 to escape the 80 Years' War, which was a religious war between the Spanish Catholics and the Calvinist Dutch. And every year for 80 years, the Spanish would come up to Netherlands to force the Dutch back into Catholicism. And at the end of the growing season every year, the Dutch would flood the country and the Spanish would go back to sunny Spain for the winter. And that went on for 80 years. I mean, talk about knuckleheads. But ultimately, that war ended with the Treaty of Westphalia. But that came long after my ancestors went to New Amsterdam in 1625. And our first ancestor, his wife and 3 sons, were 5 of the first 150 European settlers of New Amsterdam, which today is New York City. So that's a little history lesson, which I sometimes give as a homily. Biyami, Caesar Messiah's film is interesting. He blogs. His blogs are good too. I'm still looking at it. And Buzz says the flower power children of the 60s were maybe a Jungian reaction to the loss. Obviously, they were a compensation for the loss, no doubt. I haven't really thought it through in the way you've just described it, but I think you're onto something there. There's probably a book or a PhD thesis on that point. Opiami says, Atwill has published a book also. Sean says, I think you have a clear mind that I admire because of that journey. People who always keep a devil's advocate to every argument close. The unification of the polar opposites. Well, certainly we have to try to hold them in our consciousness, okay? And so, so regardless of, for example, whatever position you may be in terms of our current political troubles in the United States, if you hold both in mind, both sides in mind, and understand the problem from both sides, then you start to be a part of the individuation of the country, and that's going on, and then we can feel compassionate to our president, who obviously has not had a very happy time in his role as President of the United States. I guess that's the best I could say it. And I don't think he's destined to have a happy time at all throughout the remainder of his tenure. So, okay, I think we have probably covered it. Anyway, we've covered the 7 sermons, and there are about 10 more pages of the Red Book. They also contain some nuggets, so I am going to read them tomorrow, although it's beyond the 7 sermons. And I do have to look up where the 7 sermons appear in the collected works, because they do. I suspect they're probably found in volume 11, but I haven't looked back to see that. I was first introduced to them about 15 or 20 years ago as a freestanding PDF. So I know that PDF exists. So if you Google the 7 Sermons to the Dead, or Septem Sermones ad Mortuo, I think it's, here we go, Septem, that's the Latin. It's something like that. If you put that into Google, you'll probably have access to the PDF file, which you can download. I just remember there was one longish let's see. Okay, there were a couple of longish footnotes. I guess I read this one. Oh no, wait a minute. Yes, because there's the issue of how many stars do you want, 7 or 3? And I did not read this footnote, I think, so I think I should read it. In fact, there's a couple of them. Maybe I read them, but it wouldn't hurt to listen to them again. On February 29, 1919, Jung wrote a letter to Joan Corey and commented on the Sermones with particular reference to the last one. The primordial creator of the world, the blind creative libido, becomes transformed in man through individuation, and out of this process, which is like pregnancy, arises the divine child, a reborn God, no more dispersed into the millions of creatures, but being one and in this individual, and at the same time all individuals, the same in you as in me. I guess I did read that. Then there's this other one where Philemon had said, when you have surrendered everything that wants to burn to the holy flame. And the footnote reads, in September 1916, Jung had conversations with his soul that provided further elaboration and clarification on the cosmology of the Sermones. I guess I did read that. I apologize. Okay. I don't remember reading the last half of it, though. So, if you're tired of this video, please turn it off. But this is a longish footnote. I'm going to read it again because I think these things bear repeating. Opiami got censored. Weird. Okay, if you got censored through my automatic systems, I'll have to go back and look to see. I didn't get a message of censorship here, so it might have happened somewhere else. In September 1916, Jung had conversations with his soul that provided further elaboration and collaboration on the cosmology of the sermones. How many lights do you want? 3 or 7? 3 is the heartfelt and modest, 7 the general and encompassing. Oh yeah, I did read that. Okay, but I didn't remember this other part. He says, tell me more, it makes me feel queasy. The soul says, the golden bird is no soul, it is your entire nature. People are golden birds as well, not all. Some are worms and rot in the earth, but many are also golden birds. Continue. I fear my revulsion. Tell me what you have grasped. Soul. The golden bird sits in the tree of the 6 lights. The tree grows out of Abraxas's head, but Abraxas grows out of the pleroma. Everything from which the tree grows blossoms as a light, transformed as a womb of the flowering treetop, of the golden egg bird. The tree of light is first a plant, which is called an individual. This grows out of Abraxas's head. His thought is one among many. The individual is a mere plant without flowers and fruits, a passageway to the tree of 7 lights. The individual is a precursor of the tree of light. The lucent blossoms from him, Phanes himself, Agni, a new fire, a golden bird. This comes after the individual, namely when it has been reunited with the world blossoms from it. Abraxas is the drive, individual, distinct from him, but the tree of the 7 lights is the symbol of the individual united with Abraxas. This is where Phanes appears, and he, the golden bird, flies ahead. You unite yourself with Abraxas through me. First you give me your heart, and then you live through me. I am the bridge to Abraxas. Thus the tree of light arises in you, and you become the tree of light, and Phanes arises from you. You have anticipated but not understood this. At the time you had to separate from Abraxas to become individual, opposed to the drive. Now you become one with Abraxas. This happens through me. You cannot do this, therefore you must remain with me. Unification with the physical Abraxas occurs through the human female, but that with the spiritual Abraxas occurs through me. That is why you must be with me. Okay, I guess I did read that, and all I can say in my defense here is that it came at the time that I thought okay, well, Miles got censored because he used the word P-R-O-R-N-O. I'm not going to show your statement, Miles, only because of that, because if I put it on the chat, then we won't see any of the chat with the replay. Okay, but there's another interesting footnote here. So what I was saying was the reason I didn't remember reading that footnote was it came at a time when I was, as I said, hypnotizing myself, and so I completely lost track of it. Okay, but there's a statement here. What are you thinking? He interrupted. I bring you the bliss of paradise, the healing fire, the love of women. And the footnote reads, the version of this dialogue in Black Book 6 includes the following interchange. What about polygamy, houris, and paradise? Visitor, Many women amount to many books. Each woman is a book. Each book a woman. The hoary is a thoughtful, and thought is a horror. The hoary is a thought, and the thought is a hoary. And hoary is Houri. The world of ideas is paradise, and paradise is the world of ideas. Mohammed teaches that the Houris admit the believer into paradise. The Teutons said as much. In Norse mythology, the Valkyries escorted the brave who were slain in battle into Valhalla and tended them there. Okay, I guess these are the same Valkyries that are the 72 virgins if you sacrifice your life in a suicide bombing in the Muslim world. So Buzz says, give me 1 minute. I'll share a Google Drive with the Redbook artwork. Okay, I'm not sure you can do that on there, Robert, but thank you. We have quite a number of things in the Dropbox for the group, and those can be found there. Sean says, whatever form of hell we plunge into in our lives, I believe there is always an opportunity. It could be a lens to see the world or a catalyst to move forward. I think that's right, Sean. That's a good observation. And so Opiami says CaesarsMessiah.com. And she says she had gotten censored by YouTube, but I don't see that. So I apologize to Miles for not showing his comment there, but because he used the word PORNO in his comment makes sense, but I don't want to get the entire chat done in by the evil algorithm. Let's put it that way. We all will come to love Big Brother, says Buzz. And Sean says, that's Orwell, right? Yes, 1984, Big Brother. And we definitely have far more than what was imagined by Orwell in the late 1940s today, as we know. Buzz says, it reminds me of waiting outside the headmaster's office. Okay. Has anyone read The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin? Is wonderfully Jungian exploration of the shadow. And, by synchronicity, I don't know the name Ursula Le Guin very much. Almost not at all, I would say. But a Jungian analyst friend of mine put a Vimeo trailer on Facebook today, which is about the life of Ursula Le Guin, which is quite interesting. I think if you went on to Vimeo.com, you could put her name in and you'd probably get this trailer up. And so I was very interested in that, and now by synchronicity in the same day, I see her name again from you, Buzz. So that's very interesting. John says, all these talks makes me want to go back and read Faust. I urge you to do that, but be prepared to be disappointed, because I felt a bit disappointed when I finally did it. I found it when I read it when I was 19 or 20 in college. It was overwhelming, and I think it probably at the time Jung was dealing with it and referring to it so much, and he had a much more comprehensive understanding of it than I do. He also thought it was overwhelming and very archetypal, which obviously it is. But when I read it, I felt that the plot and so on was a bit more simplistic than I was expecting. Given what we see on movie screens these days, it's not up to that standard per se, but it's still, in terms of understanding Dr. Jung, it's certainly useful to know what's in Faust. This is The Wizard of U.S.C. Well, my books are sort of piling up on me. I have to focus on my Jung reading as a first priority, but I am reading Consilience by Edward O. Wilson, which is about bringing biology and psychology together. At least that's how it's sort of presented. And I do think it's an interesting book, and I've been interacting with one of our other subscribers about that book. I do think that, some of these scientists in the late 20th century took over many of Jung's ideas, changed the name of them, and then didn't bother to give Dr. Jung credit. They wanted to have the credit for themselves, and we can talk about that some Monday night. Robert says, I just posted the entire scanned and read book PDF on the community section of my profile page for anyone who would like to download it from the drive. Well, it's already, the PDF is actually already in the Dropbox for the general group under collected works. So anybody who is a member of our Dropbox can get access to that right away. But thank you for thinking of doing that, Robert. I appreciate that. And Buzz, you're going to have to buy a copy, because I actually have two copies. One, which is my reader's edition copy, which I mark up and tab up for discussion, and the other is my large folio copy. And it's not possible to just listen to the content in a YouTube video and get any sort of close to consciousness that's being presented to you here. And so, yes, you do have to have a hard copy, and we all have to have hard copies, and then we have to study them, and more than once. And then this is reading of the Palms is becoming a lost art. Well, I don't think there are many of Dr. Jung's books that you can read in the Palms and get and walk away with any deep learning from them. You have to really be prepared to study them. And Buzz says, you mean it's not as young as he used to be? I'll show myself out. Yeah, okay, so you need the book. Robert, taking off. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I really appreciate it, and I'll try to finish up this last section of the book, because the shade does make one more appearance, and I'm not going to spoil it for you now, but it's worth hearing the punchline of the book. So that'll be in the next video, probably tomorrow. So take care. Thanks for coming.